Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. I hope everyone is doing fine. In the previous lecture, we discussed about the risk management, and we saw that how can we actually analyze the risk and how can we actually mitigate it. We had actually discussed previously that how can one establish the context. What do we mean by establishing the context within the risk paradigm, and how can we actually identify the risk. We also discussed the fish and bone diagram, which can prove to be beneficial in identifying the problems within a running business. But we did not yet see that before starting a business or before starting any venture, how can we actually list down different risk factors, and how can we actually mitigate those risk factors and identify that what their consequences can be. Now we also discussed that the risk should be actually communicated, as well as the risk should be monitored and reviewed continuously throughout the life cycle of the project. And this life cycle of the project, this risk analysis and the risk management keeps on going throughout the life cycle of the project. In this lecture, what we are going to actually see are two things: how to analyze the risk, and then how to evaluate the risk. Now, this will be actually discussed in this lecture. And in this lecture, what I will do is I will suggest you to actually list down all the possible potential risks which you think you may face throughout, either in the beginning of starting of your venture, or maybe during the startup, somewhere initially or in the beginning, right? And then evaluate them with that, what their impact would be, and what would be the probability of occurring of each of those risks, right? So this exercise actually should be done by you. Now, the risk is basically the product of the consequences and the likelihood. So if you want to actually evaluate the severity of the risk, you must understand that what consequence that risk may actually affect your business, and you should also evaluate that what is the likelihood or the probability. So this is the probability of happening, or the probability of the risks to occur, and this is basically the consequence or the impact that risk might have on your business or the venture. So the product of this will actually provide you the exact amount of the risk which is there present for your venture. So first, what we are going to do is we're going to define the probability and impact score. The second, we are going to organize the risk, and then we are going to actually highlight the significant risks, and we are going to categorize those risks into the manner of the low risk, medium risk, and the high risk. And we are going to actually make a P&I matrix. This thing is basically P, and this is basically your impact. So we actually call it I. So if you take the likelihood over here, so this actually becomes P cross I matrix, right? So what we are going to do is we are going to develop a P&I matrix in this, where we would be able to see that what potentially the risk, where the potential risk actually lies within that matrix, right? So first, what we are going to do is we are going to define the classes of the probabilities of impact, right? For example, the probability may be very low, moderate, high, very high, and the impact can be negligible, low, moderate, and severe. So if we actually distribute this thing, and the risk score would be low, medium, and high, right? As I discussed earlier. Now, if we actually make the matrix, we are going to actually have this low with the probability of 0.1. That should be on the scale given a number as 1. Then low with the probability of 0.3. Now, this is the probability of occurrence, right? It should be actually on the scale of 2. It should be measured as a scale on the scale of 2. Then with a moderate, the probability of occurring with the 0.5 should be measured with a scale of 3. And high with the probability of occurrence of 0.7 should be actually measured with a scale of 4. And the very high with the probability of occurrence of 0.9, which is almost 1, should be actually given the should be actually measured with a scale of 5, which actually means that this is a very high probability. Same is the case with the impact. Now, negligible impact, low impact, moderate impact, severe impact, and catastrophic impact, and the same sort of a scale and the same sort of a probability is over here, right? With a 0.1 negligible, it is 1. With a low, 0.3 and 2, and moderate and severe and catastrophic, I believe this is pretty much understandable. It's not that difficult. So now, once we have actually defined our scale of the probability, and we have the scale of our impact, what we can do is we can actually list down all the risks that we may have during our business. Now, over here, what I've done is I have actually listed some of the risks that may actually occur within the business. For example, organizational financial problems, force reduction in the project budget. It is impossible to recruit staff with the skills required for the project. And against each risk, like key staff are ill at critical times in the project. Now, this is a moderate probability and has a low impact, right? The software components that should be reused contain defects and limit their functionality. That has a low probability but a severe impact. Changes to requirements that require the major design rework are proposed. That has a very high probability and a catastrophic impact. So like this, what you can do is you can actually list down all the possible probabilities and also all the possible impacts with either of the high or the medium or whatever the probability is, and the amount of the severity of the impact that it might contain. Each of the risks might contain within the process of your development of your business, right? So what you can do is you can actually list down all these risks over here and evaluate the probability and the impact. Now, once you have actually listed all the possible risks and you have evaluated the probability and the potential impact, I will suggest you to actually equate it quantitatively, right? First, it's low and negligible. This means that you go back to this chart and see that low over here is basically 2, right? And the negligible over here is basically 1. So I will strongly suggest you to actually equate it quantitatively, like 2 and 1, 4 and 3. So again, 4 and 3 is going to be the same. You have already made one of the charts through which you can actually easily equate your low and high and negligible, the probability and impact quantitatively, right? So once you have actually done it quantitatively, now it is time to actually make a matrix. If you actually see over here, you can actually see the negligible, low, moderate, severe, and catastrophic on your x-axis. Now keep this this impact over here on the x-axis at the top, and the likelihood over here on the left on the y-axis. If you can see, we can actually see the very high to very low and negligible to catastrophic. Right? So make a matrix like this, and within these matrix, keep in mind that all the boxes may contain the potential risks over here. For example, this R1 is very high and very low. So let us see if this is low, and we might have a little bit of I think there is a little bit of a problem over here, but what we can say is that for risk 1, assumingly we assume this thing that over here, although it is basically low and negligible, but we can actually see this thing that we can, if we have a very high over here, the very high probability and very negligible impact, then we can actually get the R1. Now, R1 is basically the risk 1, then risk 2, risk 3, risk 4, and so on and so forth. All the potential risks that you think that they will be there can be actually resided over here, right? So now that we actually see the risks over here, we can actually see this R1, which is actually the risk 1, right? Then the risk 2, then the risk 3 and 4 and 5. What are these risks? These are is actually the risks stated over here. Like this is the risk 1, risk 2, risk 3, risk 4, risk 5. So against each risk, we have actually mentioned that R1, R2, R3, R4, R5, R6, and so on and so forth. So if you see that R1 is actually low and negligible, right? So if we actually see that low and negligible, what we are going to do is we are going to actually put this likelihood as a low and impact as a negligible. So we're going to put R1 over here. So R2, which is stated over here, is high and moderate, with the probability of high and the effect of moderate. So if we are going to actually list down, we are going to actually see that R2 is high likelihood, which is the probability of occurring, and the impact over here is basically R2, which is moderate, right? Similarly, R3 is basically moderate and low, where we can actually see over here that R3 is 3 and 2. And what is 3 and 2? 3 and 2 over here is moderate and low. So we can see this thing that we can actually go through this moderate likelihood or the probability, and the low is basically your the impact of that risk on your business, right? Or now that we have done it, what we can do is we can actually draw the line over here in the middle. So the lower ones over here, they are going to become the low risk. Then the ones residing in the middle are going to become the medium risk, and the ones upper one over here are going to become the high risk. So we're going to put a line in between and going to divide as such. The green one over here are all the low risks, right? And the ones in the orange are all the medium risk, and the ones over here are all the high risks. There is a little bit of a difference. Like R1 is actually over here with the low and negligible, and over here it should be over here with the low and negligible rather than with the very high. So, right? So there is a little bit of a mistake in this slide. So keep this thing in mind. Whereas the basic concept is that any of the risk which actually is residing within the green section over here is a low risk. Within the orange section over here is a medium, and within the red section is it's a high risk, right? So with this, we have completed our probability and impact matrix. And with this probability and impact matrix, what we can do is we can actually uh, understand that which risks do we have to mitigate first. So this R5, R6, R7, R8, R2, these are potentially the highest risks as for the time being. And what we need to do is we need to deal with these risks and mitigate those risks immediately. Then it's R3 and R4. Now these two risks actually have the medium risk, which can actually have a potentially a medium impact on our business. So now we can actually deal with them after we have dealt with the risks in the red. And over here in the green one, these are the low risks. It's you can actually take care of them later on as well, but the highest priority at this point of time for the mitigation of the risks should be listed on the red, and then the orange one, and then the green one, right? I hope it makes the concept of probability and impact matrix. And now that you have seen that we have analyzed that what potentially different risks can affect the business, and what are the potential impact of those risks on your businesses, right? So you must understand that when you have started the business, the amount of the risks are potentially very high in the beginning of any of the business, right? So this curve actually shows that the project life cycle, that the whatever project you are doing, the cost will remain low in the beginning. The cost on the fixing the risks, right? The amount of the cost on the fixing the risks will remain low, but amount of the risks will remain high. As the time period passes and as the project of the project life cycle goes on, the amount of the risks that you will mitigate will actually, because of the mitigation and correctly adapting the probability and the impact matrix, the, the risks will eventually keep on coming down, whereas the amount of the cost that you will be spending on the risks, risk mitigation and the risk vision will actually keep on rising, right? So keep this thing in mind, that in order to avoid the risks, in order to mitigate the risks, we need to always have to have a contingency plan. Or in other words, we should have a plan B for everything, right? So you need to think a lot before you actually jump into any of the project, before you jump into any of the venture, that what are you going to do if you are going to face any higher amount of the risk. You are unable to solve a few things. There are a few things you are able to solve, and there are a few things that you are unable to solve. You will not be able to solve the taxation if the government actually implies more taxation. You will not be able to solve that. You will not be able to solve the amount of the electricity bills that will be incurred on you, right? So if you get a keep on rising that, then you need to actually think about it, that how you are going to fix those problems within your cash flows, right? So you need to have a contingency plan, you need to have a plan B, you need to have a plan for everything that you do, right? So this actually concludes today's lecture. I believe that the risk management and the risk assessment and the risk mitigation is clear to you. And I believe that you will be able to now analyze your risks and mitigate them appropriately through the proper tools that have been taught to you. If you have any queries or questions, please do let me know through commenting on YouTube, or maybe will be having next week. We will be having Thursday session by 10 o'clock. So if you have any queries, please do let me know. All right. Till that time, be safe and Allah Hafiz.